everybody. Welcome to the Game Junkie Show. I am your host, Crystal, and we are going to do a deep dive today into Dragon Claw Studios. So joining us is lead developer, Dorinius.
Hello.
We have the lead level designer, Sky.
Howdy.
And then we have the community manager, David.
Hey, everybody.
So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about, tell everybody who's watching and listening a little bit about Dragon Claw Studios.
Okay, so we actually began off probably about 5-6 years ago as a little modding group that used to mod for some neat survival games. And little by little, we actually grew more and more to the team. And one day, one of our mentors, which is a developer from another studio, he goes, you guys have made all these mods. Why don't you make a game? Like, huh? No, we can't do that. He goes, yeah, you can. Just get into it, dig into Unreal Engine the ways you didn't do it before. And so I spent probably about 2 or 3 months making like a prototype-ish type game, which we actually recently dug up a copy of that I had stored at work one day, and brought it to the team, and we're like, hey, this is a base we can work with, and slowly but surely started bringing everyone else on, and it became much larger than I actually anticipated it to be, and we had 4 or 5 people on, and then Sky joined us and completely like revamped everything and just championing everything for the level design and getting the better flow and all kinds of graphics and everything. And we're like, this is actually something we can work with. So through all that, we added a few more people to the team, launched a Kickstarter, got involved in like the indie community with a couple other like indie discords and communities that help new developers get in, and slowly just kind of grew and got some sponsorships, and some of us are making careers out of it now.
How many people are on the team total?
Currently, there's 11.
That is insane. I would have never We're going to talk about this game later, surely. I'm very, very, very excited to get this thing in my hands. Looking at what little bit I've seen of this, I'm really surprised it's such a small team, and I'm surprised that you kind of just got into this. Mm-hmm. I definitely wouldn't have guessed. I would have expected way more titles under the belt. Sky, tell me a little bit about how in the world, how do you come in and just kind of take this stuff over and put these things together and get it in the direction that it's going?
So it's actually quite a funny story, because I originally came in on the idea of doing some like community building, and that was where initially that I was going to be placed. And so I came in and I realized that we weren't able to create the certain content that we wanted to create to put out there to get people interested. And so it became about me then diving in Engine for the very first time, and just kind of trying to create that content. And from there, I kind of just kept doing it. And then it was just making those levels that I think in some ways Dorinius hates me for a little bit at the very beginning, because those were the prototype love childs that he absolutely adored, and I came in and blew them up.
I still remember the one. I think I cried a little. It's okay.
Yeah,
I forgive you.
It's okay. And each of the maps that will be in the demo as well have gone through several renditions over the last few years. And that's, I think, another reason why Dorinius kind of hates me. Simply because of the rehashing of these old areas. But we've definitely come a long way. And trying to tap into all those loved games that we either grew up with or we continue to play now, and use those as references for what has been missing in those games that we want to see coming forward in the environments and how the player interacts with the world, and just really trying to make it fantastical, nostalgic, and realistic, which is a difficult task in itself because all of those clash. but yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and it's been amazing to be a part of as well.
Is your well, we all know many people are going to watch this and recognize David's face and go, "Oh my God, I know who that is. That's our a day gamer." Is everybody on the team a fan of video game? I mean, is everybody a video game player and someone who, I mean, has that passion for games?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, most of us have uh, at least 10, 15 years of video gaming under our belts.
Yeah.
I'm a JRPG person myself. I know some of the folks on the team are RPG. Some of them are even, first person shooter. They're not really huge fans of RPG, but they still love the whole, thing that we're doing with the system. And it's actually interesting. And I kind of want to go back this a little bit. The way that Sky and I had actually met is kind of interesting because it is community based. It was a game that we mutually played, and that's how our passion actually started. Is we were playing these games, and it was an online fantasy MMO survival, and I was developing some of the mods for that game with Luke, one of our artists, and because of that, I got to work pretty closely with the developers of that game. And Sky also wanted to be part of the community for that game as well. And so one day I messaged her and I was like, "Hey, we've got some of these incidents going on over here. Is there anything we can do to kind of handle that?" Because I really got involved with that community to kind of champion the mod side of things. Like I worked with them to put up their wikis and fix their, forums and stuff like that. And so Sky was like, "Oh yeah, so we'll take care of these things." We kind of started working together, and in just a few months time frame is where that shift happened from when we went to the prototype that we were working on to then bringing her on with us for community. And it's to that single event, honestly, that I attribute literally everything that we have done. Was that one event, because I think had that not happened, we probably wouldn't be as far along as we are. The project may have failed by now. And that's honestly, and I know you're like, "No, that's not, no, don't give me that kind of credit."
Yeah,
but I'm
don't
serious,
give me all the credit. Like
it is.
I mean,
that
you would have
event.
continued. The environments just won't have been as nice. That's all. Um,
Wow, thanks, appreciate that.
But no, I definitely, the community as a whole, and this really is how we met David,
Mhm.
was because the why we got more involved in the community as a whole and the indie scene, and Owl was over there championing everything and was kind of like a beacon in this dark indie space that kind of everyone kind of looks up to, and really loves the brand and the passion behind gaming as a whole, and also the little people. Like and when I say that, I mean like the us, like we are the little people that going into this space. We've never developed anything of this scale before, and the place is quite daunting. To see someone spearheading this kind of passion for the developers as well as the games that they're producing is, I think, a really good thing in the industry as a whole, and definitely need more hours in the day and in general.
In the day, that's what I was thinking. Definitely need more hours in the day, always.
That is actually true. Yeah, I've had several guests, thanks to David, Toji Productions, Holy Cow Games, Verenius, and then now, yeah, you guys, and it'll just keep pouring on. I just keep finding indies to. I have a special place in my heart. I am truly convinced that indie developers are the heart and soul of AAA
Yes.
gaming. We wouldn't
Yes.
have the AAA games we have today if it weren't for indie developers who really have to live and die by being completely ingenious and like reinventing things because they don't have the marketing budgets. Let's talk a little bit about publishing, because I don't even know that I fully understand what it means to be an indie developer, but I believe there's a mentality that, you look at bigger developers like Naughty Dog and Insomniac, and I think they still have that indie mentality. So are you guys just Dragon Claw Studios? Are you publishing your own, or are you working with a publisher?
So right now, okay, we are developing this on our own. We are unfunded. We ran a Kickstarter last year, where we got, I think it was close. We are close to 14 grand, something like that, and that's what we've had to work with. And otherwise, it is self-funding. It is anything that we get from streaming or other donations on our website from people that find us, and we work with a very, very limited budget. And in that is the things we've actually accomplished, is what has gotten us to get a couple of our sponsors. So we actually have sponsors that help with a lot of our software and some of our hardware needs, that have worked with us, and we work in conjunction with them. And so, no, we don't have a publisher yet. That is something I think we would entertain. Um, it's going to help us in the long run. But we have been told by a number of developers out there who have published and they have gone through the whole process. They're like, listen, hold out as long as you can without finding a publisher. Get the game as far as you can, as long as you can reasonably do that. And then when you're almost there, bring them in, because then they're going to help you with all the marketing, all the little things that you might not be able to get on your own, and pick up some of those costs. But you're going to have a better deal out of that, because they're not going to have to put as much money into it and as much work as they might a game that's only 30 or 40% of the way done. And so that has two things. Then I've gone to marketers and publishers who've said, no, bring us in as early as possible so that we can handle all the marketing the whole way through. Otherwise, you won't sell anything. And so it's very confusing as to know,
yes,
do we bring a publisher in now? Do we wait 50%? Do we wait 75%? And what's the benefits to us? But honestly, one of our goals of even doing this and starting this, like I said, we've been part of an indie development community, and I used to actually really despise the term indie. Actually, when I first got into it, when someone was like, "Oh, you're an indie developer," like, what does that even mean? Why are you calling me that? No, I'm a developer. Because I think some of the community has, like the Steam community especially, it's driven this negative connotation of what an indie is. And when I first got into it, that's the way I felt about it. And then once I got into the community and I realized, like, wow, no, indie, that's good. Call me that. Like, I want you to call me an indie now, because I realized that's a good thing. And you can see there's a lot more passion. There's more time. Little things bother us that big AAA gets away with, like little collisions and clippings through the cloth and things like that. That bothers us to the point we want that to be perfect. But AAA, you phase through a rock, cool, and you move on with that.
People are going to buy the game anyway. They don't care.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that. Is it because of a name that you okay? But Balasaga got it. Whatever the hell this company is, it's making Fortnite shirts for like $50 million. I assume that's because
Balenciaga.
Yes, thank you, Sky. Somebody had to know it, because I don't. That, to me, that's like, okay, that's a name. Is that kind of the same principle in the gaming space? I'm not trying to attack you, Ubisoft, but let's be honest, you've had some issues lately. You are Ubisoft, and you are going to sell a shit ton of copies of games, even if you release it to us.
So it is. It does have some effect. And so if we were to take on a publisher, and I kind of maybe inflate my head a little, thinking that we could even go after these people, but we would want to look at people like Square Enix and Bandai, Capcom, maybe some of the mid-range publishers. I really don't want to honestly sign the game with a lower range publisher. Some of the more what you might consider quote unquote indie publishers. But a lot of the big AAA titles, I think things are coming around. That's why when I first got into the industry, indie wasn't a great term. And I think in the past 5 years, thanks to people like, David, indie has really changed. And I think now indie is what people want and they expect. And because now there's all these amazing games thanks to Unreal Engine and the advancements in technology, that, the modern indie game is not what it was 5 years ago. It's not what people call quote unquote asset flipping anymore. And you have all this attention to detail and these deep storylines and complex mechanics, and this is all in low funded, 50,000 and under video games, which anything under the average you'll see, like when you're talking indie for any type of software companies, like 125 to 200,000 and below. If you're under that, you're considered indie tier. But there's so many amazing things coming out now in that indie tier that people are going, wait, why is AAA doing this? Why are the indies better than the AAAs? And you've got all these indies that are now becoming the AAAs, which are taking place, and things are being paid attention to more often in the games, and the communities are now getting involved in ways they didn't before. And so I think there's been quite a shift in the last few years that we need to keep moving. We need to keep pushing the bar on that in indie development.
Well, that's just carry on.
No, I was just going to say, when you said the numbers and talked about how, I mean, your budget's very low. It's not. I'm not being mean when I say you guys are poorly funded in a sense, right?
Yes, no, we are absolutely.
I mean, I've seen pictures of the work your animators have done, and I've seen videos that David posted, and I would not believe for a second this is a poorly funded project. So just to make sure that I understand, and everybody who's listening and watching understands, when you're an indie team, you can't just rely on a name. You can't just rely on a franchise or people saying, oh, a AAA is coming out, buying it. So you have to be really methodical in your approach of paying attention to the details.
Right.
And the advantage of not having a publisher is that you don't have somebody pushing you to meet dates and saying, well, we want this content, or we don't. Like, is there more censorship and less control for you if you work with a publisher?
And Sky can talk about this a little bit as well. It depends on the publisher. Some give you control, some don't. It's called creative control. That's what they take away from you. And so, a lot of times now there's a lot of new publishers coming out for indies that they don't take away creative control. They let you keep most of it, but they do have something. So,
and yeah, that's something that has come around, I think, because the games industry and entering the games industry has become a lot more accessible than it was 4 to 5 years ago, simply because of the technology that can be used now. That empowers creatives of all manner of kind of skill sets, whether they're just beginning or, have been a veteran in some kind of creative format before. Like my previous sort of thing was photography, so that aided me in sort of adapting into this kind of, composition and everything else. But when it comes to publishers, there are a lot, because the industry is a lot more accessible. These publishers tend to find the indies that are going above and beyond, and giving them full creative control, because simply that it adds to their repertoire as well, because they know that you're going to be doing a good job. That's probably why they signed you. But it's also that they can keep tallying up all these different titles under their publisher name, and they don't need to take creative control. They're able to then get more games out themselves by having all these sort of outsourced development teams, if you will, that they've continuously signed. And there's lots popping up, and I think it's a good thing and a bad thing, simply because I think there's two sides to every coin, and there are a lot of people that believe they are forced to go with a publisher if they are to make it successful, especially because reputation, and AAAs have that reputation of, they've got this legacy of games that might have come out, 20, 30 years ago originally, and they've built this sort of house name and they're known, so people do buy. But when you're an indie developer, you kind of worry that you're not going to stand a chance, no matter how good it looks, because you just simply can't get that audience because they're taken up by all these AAA releases consistently. And one prime example of I think an indie company that have really hit the mark would be Ninja Theory, because they started off as an indie company, and now those games are phenomenal. Like Hellblade as a series is interesting. It taps into more than just the visuals. You've got the psychological elements too, and there's things that weren't being done that they tapped into being in the indie sphere that sort of skyrocketed them forwards. And I think Owl would be probably the best person to talk to about like how all of this as a whole has changed the indie community, just from the interactions that he's had over the last couple of years, and how that shift has actually happened and what those trends might be, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm seeing a whole lot of a plethora of new indie games and new indie developers and new indie publishers. I mean, there's so many people jumping on board with the indies now because I think they're tired of the AAA. They're tired of, oh, I'm going to pay $60 for this game. It's going to be the same exact game as it was last year. It's going to have the same problems. So I think they're starting to want to branch out and check out the creativity that a lot of the indie developers have. And that's how I got into it. You mentioned Verenius earlier, Jen from Law Mage Academy. That is actually where I got my indie start. I was talking to him and I streamed this game one time and I absolutely loved it. It was so creative. There was a lot of original, assets and stuff from the store. But it was a very creative, very, what I thought groundbreaking game, and he's still developing it. So that really opened my eyes. I was always under the impression as a gamer my whole life, since I could pick up a controller, I was always under the impression it had to be AAA. If it wasn't AAA, I didn't want to play it. If I heard somebody mention an indie game, or I saw a sale of indies on the PlayStation Store or whatever, I was like, nah, I'm not going to go for that. But that, when I met Jen and played Law Mage Academy, that opened my eyes. So I knew right then I wanted to help get other people to see the light, so to speak, that I saw, and say, hey, I want you guys to come play indie games, come check them out, give them a shot, and I know you're going to love it. And I just love it. And that's why I met Jesse and Sky, and I was actually streaming the early alpha version of Twilight Star. And even then I fell in love with the game, and there's been so many updates and stuff now. We have an upcoming demo with all these amazing updates, and it's just going to blow people away. I know it will. I always describe it on Twitter as like, and I'm going to say it here. I don't know. I just love this saying. It's because it's like if Skyrim and Final Fantasy had a baby, they would name it Twilight Star. That's how I feel about this game.
Wow. Is it a playable demo?
Mm-hmm.
Now, see, that is something we did a hype episode. That's something we were saying that has gone away. I mean, I remember in the PS1 days, you could get a disc shipped to you that had 6 or 7 playable.
Yes.
Why aren't companies do it? Is it because you're indie and you don't have a publisher that you're able to do that? Talk about that.
No, actually. So anyone can actually have a demo. I mean, you can make a demo of your game. You can lock it down. It's a little bit harder when you're playing doing the online, MMO kind of realm thing. But in recent years, and again, last 5 years, Steam actually has, even though, and maybe we'll touch on this, it's one of my favorite subjects to talk about, even though Steam pretty much takes like a majority of your profit from you, they do give you one heck of a platform to work on. And they've made a lot of advancements in the back end of us being able to do things where we can offer a demo right on our front page, and it's a totally separate downloadable version of the game that we have internally locked down, and then you can just go play that, and it's free, and you don't have to buy the game or anything or sign up for anything, and you can just play that. And actually, I think where demos got kind of a thing of the past was when early access became a thing. And early access is another thing that we're kind of very against. And as Sky said previously, we go back to our roots on this, and it's that we wanted to have 90s kind of style and feel to it a little bit, because back then that's when a lot of great RPGs, JRPGs came out, and it's all the ones we fell in love with when we were kids and growing up playing them. And we have shied away from some of those original things that we did, and demos are one of them. And the ability to play the game beforehand, Steam does give you the whole 2-hour return policy thing. and you as the developer can actually extend that a little bit. I think up to 3 or 4 hours now. But I really would like to see a lot more people giving those demos, because I think, especially in the indie realm, if you can offer a demo that just gives a little piece of it, especially for the game, at our price, again, we're indie. Maybe we're going to self-publish. Maybe we'll have a publisher. But I'll tell you right now, our price is going to be $39.99. Right? That's a little bit scary in the indie realm. Again, thanks to the Steam platform, drive everyone prices as low as you can get them to sell as many copies as you can. But again, we want people to understand that we're trying to produce a quality product. We're trying to be up there with the other great quality indie games that are coming out. So yes, it is a little more expensive, but how do we tell you that? How do we make you feel comfortable in purchasing that without doing the 2-hour return, right? Give a demo. It's that simple. Give a demo. Give them a 2 to 3 hour demo that they don't have to purchase. They're not obligated to have anything out of it, and then let them play. Let them decide for themselves in that first 2 or 3 hours without the clock. Because this is what I found out. I actually recently, and I will admit it, I returned a game on Steam. I bought it. I was super excited for it, and I played 2 hours into it. I'm like, this ain't me at all. Like I can't play this. It looked great, but I think part of me did not enjoy the game, or I didn't give the game the time of day it deserved, because I knew I was under a clock, and I knew I only had 2 hours to make a decision if I liked that game or not. So here I am under the clock, like, how long have I been playing this? Can I still return this if I don't like it? Am I sure I don't like it? And so I think part of it was psychological for me, that had I actually given the game a fair chance, I probably would have liked it a bit more than I did in the end. And so for that, the demo, you can repeat it again and again and again, right? You can play it once, 2, 3, 4 times, and you're not obligated of any time frame to have to return it. And so I think, if we bring those back and more people would do demos of their games, I think that would also help boost the confidence of how people feel about indies. They're not just trying to take your money from you and not care about you. Here's this demo, go play as much as you want, and then if you like it, play the whole story.
I think it's just the opposite. Indies do care about their fans.
Mm-hmm.
Indies, if they're getting a little bit of feedback on, hey, this isn't right or this isn't right, they'll fix it like almost immediately, or as soon as possible. Whereas AAA, they may or may not fix it. Hey, they're still making money. They're selling millions of copies. So indies really take the time to really appreciate their fans and listen to their feedback.
And I think you brought up a good point. And I know that my buddy Logic has mentioned this a couple times. 2 hours is just, it's a made up number. It's sometimes the onboarding process of games. Like,
it is
2 hours, you don't really get into that. So you said some things that were an eye opener for me. I am exclusively a console player. I love all the consoles, but I'm PC stupid. Is the environments that consoles give you is part of their store, and the way that works a reason why developers aren't able to give demos? Is it less likely for you to see it on console for certain reasons?
I mean, back when everyone had CDs and DVDs for the games, it was easier to have demos and just have those on disc for someone to play. Now it is through the store, and I have both consoles, and I haven't touched them in years. So I can't really say whether or not we do have demos, but I do remember at least being able to access a couple demos of certain games on the store. So I don't think it's out of the question. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like, this is something that is kind of almost a newer thing in the last couple of years solely, that console is now becoming a platform that is a bit more indie favorable. In some ways, there are programs that both NVIDIA and both Intel have programs to get indie games out there. And those would be also on consoles, because whether it's through Intel Boost or GeForce Now, those are more readily available. But there is something to be said about also, as an indie, producing a demo for console alongside development for PC. because there are a lot of different caveats to developing on console. There is a lot more restrictions in terms of optimization and performance that need to be met for it to run well on console. And a lot of indies don't necessarily either have the funding and the time to put that in, or they're just kind of, I think, sometimes scared away by console because of the whole sign-up process and the back end side of things, and it's kind of terrifying.
It is. It is. We went through that recently. Actually, we're still waiting on our approvals for both Xbox and PlayStation.
And I know a couple developers, like from Malaysia, India. They can't get the dev kits. The customs holds it and wants to charge them an astronomical amount. So this is. I mean, these are things we as gamers we don't know these things. We don't know the struggles that you're facing. So does that mean you would make the game on PC first and then change it to adjust it for the consoles?
Yeah. It's much easier to develop on PC. There's a lot more debugging, reporting. There's all kinds of stuff we can get on PC that we can't get on console. And oftentimes, when you release a game on PC and you only intended it to be on PC, that a little down the line, if it does really well, then you oftentimes will bring in another publishing company that will handle the port for you. They're going to say, okay, we're going to bring you in, but we want all the rights to Switch, or we want all the rights to PlayStation or whatever. And then you'll get a percentage of whatever they sell, but their team is going to take our code and do all the work to do that porting.
Okay. I think that answers the question, because I know this has been talked about a lot in the gaming community. AAA companies aren't making you a demo because you're going to buy the damn thing. So let's just be honest about that.
Exactly.
The challenge with a lot of indie developers is the limitations for working in that specific hardware's API. So, I feel I know some shit now.
And there are definitely a lot of limitations out there. And I think in kind of competing with AAA as a constant thing, it's always in the back of the mind, because we know the gamers are going to buy those. But what can we do aside from package up this shiny product that is amazing, plays amazing? Sometimes that's not enough, and that's really heartbreaking. I am definitely on game development TikTok. That found me pretty early on, and there are some great content creators on there that talk about how, like, the differences between how, like, demos started out in early access and even now the pre-purchase system that a lot of publishers will push forward, and how kind of useless those pre-purchases are. But that's just how before, if you was going to a physical store, you would pre-purchase to make sure your copy was there. But now it's just so that the publisher knows that they've secured a sale and how many sales they can get. And then they can gauge interest on how much money they're going to continue to spend to go forward. And obviously indies don't have that luxury. And I think this is why I'm kind of a devil's advocate for early access. Because in some ways, early access can allow developers and indie developers to continue developing their product, even at a slow rate, maybe, and still be able to get something out there because they're earning a little bit from the game as they go. And that's also why people are scared of early access, because there are developers that have utilized that to kind of scam, or the development has fallen through, which happens sometimes. And then it leaves people wondering whether or not they can trust early access games or games that come up on Kickstarter and other crowdfunding, because there have been accounts of people purposely scamming. And that affects everyone in the industry, because it limits what resources are out there and kind of the audience that is willing to take that chance on, a studio. And I want to briefly go back to, like, the price mark that Jesse mentioned earlier. Is something also is that it's not just a potential player purchasing the game. We have a lot of ambitions for the studio, and we want to really. This is why we've gone full scale with our sort of debut product, is because we want to launch this studio and do even more the next time, and just keep building on this and really create games that gamers want and have been wanting for a long time, but AAA don't listen because they don't need to. But indie studios and indie developers don't have that luxury to ignore, and nor would we want to, because that passion is there because we grew up with the games. And I want to say this: it's not all AAA. Some AAA companies are pretty good at the way they treat their consumers as well as their development teams. And most of the time, it's not the development team's faults. Even on the bigger games, it's publishers want to bring down and put down the product as soon as they can, and that leads to a lot of crunch, which is another industry problem.
And that's actually. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go. You say that, and then I want to make sure we go from there. We're going to talk about this debut because it is time we unleash the beast and let people know what they are in for.
Sure. So something Sky was talking about just a minute ago, in regards to the developers and publishers, the relationship there, and how the community views them, is something that I think more players need to understand. Is that some of the bigger games, and this comes to early access and some survival games out there and some things we've been involved with, that it's not always the developers, and sometimes the developers are just as crushed by the publishers, and for instance, the game itself, the community is coming after the developers for why do these problems exist, why why you're doing this and not this, and something that they can't say, and we wish when you're under contract with publishers, there's things you can and can't say, and we wish they could, because something to understand is that the player sees the developers, that they're the ones in charge, and they're the ones that are controlling that game entirely. And this is coming back to the topic of creative control. And when you're approached by publishers and say, hey, we want you to do this game for us, and then they're working on it, they're the ones interfacing with the community, but they're being told what to do on the back end. And so oftentimes, when things aren't being paid attention to, or they're ignoring things, it's because their publishers are telling them, ignore these things, focus on these things. And it can be self-interest, money self-interest sometimes, that it holds that game back from being what it could actually be. And so the developers feel absolutely horrible, and they wish they could actually fix these few things, but they're just not allowed. Which is where that's kind of my fear, is if we bring someone in too early, do I have to give up more creative control, and am I going to be told what we as the team have to do, and then is our community not going to like us for that? We want to be able to listen to our community and hear that feedback and go, yeah, we're going to address these things, and we don't care what this guy behind me is saying.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I'm going to be the one that brings this up. Cyberpunk. I'm just going to go because this makes me think of that. I'm actually a fan of the game. I do like it. I see some of the things they did well, and I feel terrible for those developers.
Yeah. Something to keep in mind. I played Witcher. Sky, I think you've played Witcher.
Yes, I've played Witcher,
and
that's my jam.
Yeah, and David, have you played Witcher before?
I've played it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So we all know. I grew up with Witcher for like 20 years. We all know who they are as a studio and how amazing they are, and how they will not release a product until it's perfect. And then for the first time, they get these massive publishers involved who produced the world's second largest expensive game, number one being Halo, two being Cyberpunk, and they had all the issues they had in the end. So you can't tell me that was the devs' fault. They were made to pay attention to something that they didn't want to, and they released before they were ready to. But that was completely unfair to them.
The point is to the communities online. I would be pissed too if I didn't have a PS5 and I bought it for the 4. I would be pissed too because it didn't. But the toxicity towards the developers, we have to reel that back. We have to be reasonable at where we put these responsibilities and expectations. So let's talk about Twilight Star. You have to, is it pronounced Ire?
Heart of Air.
Heart of Air. I wouldn't have got that. So let's talk about Twilight Star, Heart of Air. Now I'm just going to go ahead and say it, and y'all need to keep these receipts. David has made some promises of what this game is like. This is not
David. What have you been promising exactly?
He told me something along the lines. He said, "I promise you, there are elements of this game that are going to feel like a AAA title, coming from a very small indie team." So let's talk. Let's gush about this game. Tell us what kind of game it is, what it's about, what inspired it.
Sure. So, originally, the original inspiration for it was actually Star Ocean. That's where it was the last game that I had played. And again, going back to the whole AAA thing, I love Star Ocean, one of my favorite series. And the last one I played, I just didn't like it. It was the first one in the entire series of like 9 games that it bothered me to actually play it. The story was just not there, and I didn't connect with any of the characters, which was very abnormal for me. And so I was kind of fed up with it, and so I wanted to recreate this JRPG 90s style, and I know Sky's going to laugh at some of this. Very
ruined it.
Very 90s style. I mean, we had retro menu systems, and like and I really shouldn't admit this on air. The loading screens in the game are imposed. They don't actually need that long. They don't need to be there. They are there specifically because we want them to be there for just the right amount of time where you don't hate it, but it doesn't bother you, because it's the feel of the game we're trying to generate. And so they serve a few more purposes than that, but for the most part, they really are imposed. We could just make the screen go black and 2 seconds later make everything. But we're getting the main maps, and
I think we've evolved to the point where we need that 5 to 6 seconds now. To be honest,
That's so interesting. Like little details like that. Like thinking of something like it's just remarkable. I'm in awe. How does 11 people think of stuff like this? I mean, how in the world do you go in every single day and find these ideas and find this inspiration? How the hell are you so creative?
Well, we wanted to create an original universe. It's the universe is Twilight Star, right? That is the universe. And so we're on a planet Ethrol, which is just one of the 2 planets, and you'll hear references to Arcadia, which is another game that we're working on. And so we wanted the whole world to be unique in many aspects, and this is something that we've actually fought a lot on, to the point where I wanted to call an apple something different, but Bryony, our writer, and Sky's like, why? Just call it an apple. Just let it be an apple. And I'm like, no, I want it to be something different. So we try to find other ways we can really make it its actual own universe. And so simple things like earth, air, fire, and water, right? If we're on a different universe in a different world, why am I going to call it Earth? Why would I call it Earth? It's not Earth. We don't know what Earth is, right? So instead, we're like, okay, well, let's come up with element names that would make sense. And we go to our roots, and a lot of our roots is actually Proto-Germanic and Celtic, where we go for a lot of our language. And so we came up with Edra, Air, Fire, and Agua.
I like it.
And so Edra is Earth. It's easy enough. So the first letters are still matching the original element names, but and they're easy enough to say, they're quick enough to look at. We have the icons that descript them very, the way they should be, but we don't have Earth. And so you'll see that throughout the game. Everywhere you'd normally see the word Earth, you'd see Edra. And we make sure to never say Earth in the context of the game. We always make sure we say Ethrol. and so that's our planet name is Ethereal. So we wanted to have some similarities so that you can relate to it and you can kind of understand everything around you. But we also have our own language. We have our own written script language in the game, and you as the player can learn it. And if you learn how to actually read it, which is an English cipher, so you can learn it very, very quickly, then you can actually solve puzzles a little bit quicker. You can understand what's some of the things are saying around you. Our save point actually has an entire inscription on it, and it's written in a way that if you translated it, you would understand that all it's describing is a place in which you commune with, that you're copying a version of your life. And so if you can actually decrypt that, you're like, oh yeah, that's how you describe a save point, I guess. And so
that's badass.
and so it's kind of funny. We really enjoy when we have other streamers go on and they're like, all right, I'm going to figure this out. And then they're just like trying to read it. And you can see them reading like every other word.
Every single word.
I feel like that. I feel like you guys, all of those things to me, right, as somebody on the other side who's thinking of it as somebody who loves games, immersion. Like you thought about all these details that adds to the authenticity and the immersion of the game. So it is, you said it is an RPG, right? So it's a fantasy base RPG.
It is an RPG, JRPG, MMORPG to some degree, and every other RPG, action RPG.
Can you tell we've clashed on this before?
So we've come up with mixed RPG, or MRPG. It's its own classification because it's hard to classify this game in particular. You can't call it a JRPG, but it has definitive JRPG elements. And we also have some MMO elements, like you can hire an assassin to come into your party if you need an extra party member, a little bit stronger in town, things like that. But they don't have anything to actually do with you. The way we handle the stores, our stores have an actual economy to them, much like an MMO would. And so when you're selling or buying more things, it actually affects your prices of those items. So we have certain elements from each genre of RPG, but the best thing you can say is we're an RPG or we're an MRPG.
Yeah. Can I just say, I hate the way we classify games because of that reason. Like some games I'm like, wait a minute, you're not an RPG, you're an action adventure with RPG elements. Like I wish we could just be like, we're not going to define it. It's Twilight Star. That's the game.
It's an awesome game. Period.
If Scott, if I could pick one thing that Scott and I probably fight the most on, it's how we classify this game.
Yeah, that's for sure, and with good reason too. I think because there is also elements of like typical survival games. And there is a place called Sanctuary where you can basically, it's on another plane, like an ethereal plane, if you will. So it's a safe haven. So as you progress through your adventures, you can actually bring people in. You can say to like this NPC or that NPC, like I will save you. Come to like my land, if you will, and help me build this village and this sanctuary. And through that, you can get certain buffs and crafting extra certain things. And there's a lot of these different elements. And I think we've got to the point now where we're obviously happy with where we are with that. But for a long while in early prototyping, there was a lot of concern about feature creep. And there was a lot of concern, I think, between mine and Jesse's relationship alone because of how much we went back and forth of this. Jesse is a big fan of JRPG, whereas I'm, my thing is like Witcher and Dragon Age and obviously some World of Warcraft in there and also all these survival games. So this kind of clashed, and that's kind of how we've ended up with this Final Fantasy Skyrim love child of a game because of that clash. And I think even though I'm pretty sure there probably was tears. I'm pretty sure there was like keyboards destroyed in this process. I'm kind of glad that we've had that back and forth. My partner often calls Jesse my husband overseas because we row a lot but in a good way.
Always in a good way. It's always been a good result in the end.
Yeah, I mean,
and usually, and well, it's usually our egos in the middle of it, because there's ways we want things to be, and there's ways we envision it. But we always want to make sure that no matter what we're doing, we are doing the right thing. And so, even though one or the other will always bang our head against the wall for a while on it, or just not give in the end, we'll always try to step back and be like, okay, what should we really be doing here, without taking either of our personal feelings into account? What's the right thing to do? And so we've done that, time and time again. And one of the really big things, one of the central parts of the game, is the combat system. Everyone, for any type of game, wants amazing combat work, and Colin is one of he's our lead gameplay designer. He's working on the current combat system. Well, on one of them. That's where we couldn't come to the conclusion on how we wanted to handle it. And so when the game first started, there was a very, very turn-based system, like way turn-based. And so one of my inspirations again was Star Ocean. So I wanted to have some of those elements, but Scott's like, no, we need to have an action, like a real action RPG. I'm like, all right. So give me a little while, and I rebuilt the whole battle system, and it was awful. So it was so bad. We had a person play on live on stream, and she had some like 300-400 viewers for this stream, and she's the whole time, wow, this is amazing, it's beautiful, and I remember some of the events, and the whole community was having so much fun with it. Another one of the things is our horse can swim. I don't know if that's a big deal. That seems to be a big deal for a lot of people. The horse can swim. Anyway, so
that's good because I hate it when I have to go way the hell around this map. Like, I love that the horse can swim.
So, well, it's kind of funny, and the reason I say that is because when the streamer had actually jumped into the water, or she was trying to jump over the water, and when she couldn't make it all the way over, she fell into the water. And she's like, wait, the horse can swim? Oh my God, the horse can swim. And I'm like, what? I'm sitting in the background like, what are you talking about? I did that to fix a bug. Like, that's the only reason the horse can swim. It's just I wanted to fix a bug that kept happening. So
now it's a feature.
Yep. So I made this awful battle system. She's going through the whole thing, and she gets to the first battle. And we're like an hour and a half ish in, which first off is way too long for your first battle. We found that out. And so we're about an hour and a half in. She gets to the first battle. She's done. She's like, I'm not going to lie. That was not good. And my heart sunk. And I'm like, oh no, what have I done? What, why wasn't it good? And we got good feedback from that. And so we couldn't decide on what we wanted to do. And so we wanted to make sure that whatever we did was strong. It was a very strong battle system that held its own mechanics, and no matter what you did, everyone was going to enjoy it. But we didn't want to dump the roots of where the game was coming from. So we made two. We have two different battle systems. We have
if I'm a player, I have access to two different battle systems?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Completely turn-based and action combat.
So I get to pick.
You get to pick, and you can switch at any point in time.
Like, so if you're in the mood for dodging and hacking and slashing, you can do that.
Always.
But if you're like all of a sudden you're like, my fingers are hurting, I'm just gonna switch to traditional turn-based.
There's something
select through your options.
Something really cool, like really, really freaking cool. I think about that. Different players like different kinds of games. Like, my wife is more of like the Pokemon, Animal Crossing. She kicks my ass at Magic the Gathering, and I get so mad. She's very good. Like, we both love strategy, but she's remarkable at turn-based. She could play this game at turn-based. She doesn't like all the combat because she said it was too complicated with too many buttons. I would go in and play it in just brutal combat, and she could do it turn-based. But that's really cool because you can introduce more people, more family members, even kids to the game in turn-based.
And that's just it. That was one of the things. My daughter, she wants to play Final Fantasy, and I played the first Final Fantasy when I was 7. And the new Final Fantasy, it's a little more explicit. So I wasn't like super comfortable with her playing that one, but she could at least play the old version. Again, turn-based, it's easier to work with. And so, I wanted to make sure that we did have that, that everyone could actually enjoy the game at their own pace, and you weren't forced into a battle style, because the battle style really does make or break how a lot of people envision the game, how if they're going to play it. If it's turn-based only, we're going to cut a lot of our modern audience out of a game, and if it's action only, we're going to cut an entire retro and turn-based people out of a game that its roots came from turn-based. That just didn't make sense to do something like that. And so
Has anybody done this before? Like, did you guys?
It's not entirely unique. It's not entirely unique. There are a couple games out there that do have it, but we're the first. Yeah, there's like 2 games out there that have it that I know of, XCOM and another one, but they're not story-driven JRPG-esque RPG type games. They're more of an action, comic kind of game that has it for the one. And then Final Fantasy, the new Final Fantasy, does have like a turn-based mode to it, but it's not entirely traditional. But yeah, so it's not completely original, but we are pretty original for the most part in its idea that we have them side by side. You can switch whenever you want to, and it is truly action or absolute traditional turn-based.
Wow, and I love like narrative is my jam. That is like, I love narrative games. That's really remarkable. Like I can't really recall a game that's offered that, a narrative heavy game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've decided to do a lot of interesting things, like with our options. We have a lot of different options even in there that a lot of games don't have. One of them is walk speed, so you can actually control how fast or how slow your character is walking by default as in a slider in the menu. And that was something we introduced, and it's very, very simple to do, but I guess not a lot of games have implemented something like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so some of the other things are some of the controls we give and the way we present the controls to the player is, it is taken for granted that every game nowadays has rebinding for all your keys, right? But does every game, or I should say, does any game out there completely adapt to what you're currently doing with a keyboard or controller? And what I mean by that is our entire interface, the entire interface, the whole game actually adapts to controller or keyboard. So if you are using the keyboard currently and you're running through the game and you decide you wanted to play with your controller instead, you can actually pick up the controller, and the minute you press any of the joysticks or a button, the entire interface will change to controller, and the entire menu system, anything you see, like if you're facing a door and it says press E to open the door, right? If you would touch the controller, that interface would instantly change to say press A to open the door. And it adapts to all the controller icons and everything else. And you as the player don't change anything. You're not even in the options to do this. It's just doing this automatically for you. And that was something I wanted to make sure we actually had done, because that is actually unique. And I have not seen that in any other game. I actually looked for it one day because someone goes, "That's never been done before." I'm like, "Yeah, it has. It's been done a lot of times." Like, no, that really hasn't. No one has an automatic switching system that works and works well. And so we've spent a lot of time. I've spent at least like 300-400 hours in the UI just to make sure that I can have controller through there. And I'm only about halfway done.
And I definitely think like that being one of our like biggest accessibility points too. There are a lot of accessibility points that we want to touch on going forward. Mm-hmm. But in general, I feel like this is why it's so important to, and why we're also so grateful to have someone like Aura on the team, because we then have that ability, and Aura has this vast ability to touch base with not just indie developers, but indie lovers as well. And that's great in terms of sculpting a game for that audience, and not just being like empty feedback just to boost engagement or anything like that, but genuinely wanting to know how we can improve this, how we can take it to the next step. And I think without Hour, we would be lost in that, especially going forward and as we get deeper and deeper, and and how everything works out there.
So this will be specifically a PC only game, correct? It's not
No.
So you
No.
you will be making it for consoles.
Oh yeah. Yep. We're waiting. we're waiting on both Xbox and PlayStation to approve our console dev kits. We have a little bit more paperwork to submit to them that we're holding off until we get the demo ready to go. But no, we fully intend. We will not be coming to Switch. There is no way we're going to make this thing work with the Switch's power available to it. However, maybe if Steam gets us the development kit that I signed up for like 3 weeks ago, we might be able to come out with the Steam Deck. So at least we could be able to play on that. We don't know yet. We're waiting on that still.
So and if don't commit to any dates, are we still kind of far off, or
ideally next July, but it's going to come out when it's ready.
Okay,
that's
okay.
This is something that has not changed very recently, but originally, if you do check our Steam, and for anyone listening or watching later on, our Steam might be outdated on our date right now.
Mm-hmm.
We went through a lot of pressure points in development, and we then realized that we weren't going to meet that because there was a lot we wanted to do, and we still hadn't done it. And we like being transparent because I think that's important generally.
Very.
And yeah, we do definitely want to release when it's ready, and that is looking July, with the demo for November of this year. And yeah, with the whole combat shakeup of rebuilding that and building that dual system, and some of the environments, and now that we've also ported over to Unreal Engine 5, so we're using next gen tech, which comes with its own caveats, because there isn't a lot of documentation on certain things. It's a new learning curve, but it allows us to do things that we couldn't previously do, or we couldn't do them as well. With like the levels, for example, one of the new features within Unreal Engine 5 is their world partition system. And that allows us to basically break everything up in what you would imagine like a giant grid. But it also means that multiple people can be working in that same area at once. Previously, we couldn't do that. But with that means that we can have a lot more going on in our levels and that sort of depth and immersion in them, without suffering in performance and optimization and things like that. So there is a lot more we can do. And even though we are behind what we originally wanted to do in timescale, I think overall we're glad that we took that time, because we want to make this the best it can be for the players. Not just because also it'll be nice to go, look, we made a pretty thing. But definitely more to it, and it's definitely a process. But glad we're doing it the way we're doing it.
And how many people are writing? You have one writer?
Yes.
One writer writing a freaking RPG. That's not easy.
Yeah. My! Again, it goes back to some of the technology we get to use at our fingertips. Is we use a lot of next gen tech, and so what makes it really nice is when I'm doing the gameplay integration in real time, I can actually be working with our writer Bryony across seas in the same exact software, and I can physically see what she is working on and synchronize that to my machine and upload it directly into Unreal and test it right then and there. And that's why I said that's where a lot of our sponsors have really helped us. And if I got to say one thing to indies in trying to make their way, we have a saying, 2 simple words: just ask. That's how we started. Just ask. And so we emailed our first person, Enoch from Reillusion, and I sent that email a long time ago, and I didn't get a response back for a long time. And then one day in my email, I got a letter and it was in my spam, so I wasn't really paying attention to it. And I was like, "Oh, cool, that's neat." And I kind of just passed it off. And it's uh, I didn't pay attention to any of this, and so then Sky and I were talking, and she goes, "Did you ever hear back from the person?" "Oh yeah, I heard back from them, but we're not going to be able to." And so I just let it go, and I let that opportunity completely go away. And she goes, "Why don't you just reach out, just ask, like just get back to them?" And like, all right, fine. So I did, and it ended up turning into one of our sponsorships. And so we've worked with them closely to help develop the game and really ramp up our character creation software, which has granted us the amazing ability to create these awesome characters for the game. Really, and if you go to our site, you'll see a lot of what the characters look like that we can bring into the system. Same thing with our dialogue software, again, that I was talking about previously. Again, that's another sponsor we just asked. NVIDIA is another one. We just asked them. And so I think a lot of indies are hesitant to ask, or hesitant, like, "Oh, we're not good enough to talk to them." And that's not true. That's not true at all. You present yourself in the proper way, and you write a good email. that's it's one thing. I've worked in IT for like 15 years, and I tell anyone, the first thing you need to do is learn how to write a good email. A good email can set the tone for an entire relationship.
It's true.
And
so true.
And so that's really helped us. And so in some way, yes, some of those have attributed to our setback, but at the same exact time, all of those relationships have attributed to the fact that we are where we are, and we have been able to develop at the level that we can now, and produce the quality that we can. Because again, we're unfunded. This game right now has less than $22,000 in its entire budget. That's all costs. That is finding artists for concept art, character or creature design, animation, some weapons design stuff, all of the assets that we use, bringing in artists to create complex assets for us. That pays for all of our software, server hosting costs, everything. It's had to cover everything we have.
That is crazy. Before we wrap up, I have a question that I have to ask David, and then I thought up of a fun question we could do in closing. First, I can't believe the budget's that low based on what I've seen with screenshots and with some of the video that you've showed me, David. Like, you can, if you're watching this, you can see the look on my face throughout this episode. I'm in complete freaking shock. David, you and I we see the gamers and we see the gamers. Yep. Do you think the transparency, right? So this real, authentic, open discussion we're having right now, right, with Dragon Claw, is this the kind of authenticity that and transparency that's missing in the gaming community that makes people so grossly unaware? And maybe that's why we have some unreasonable expectations and some consumer problems on the gamer side.
Absolutely. I mean, used to, the way I looked at things was, oh, hey, exactly like we talked about Cyberpunk earlier, oh, this game is not good. How come, the developers, they must not be any good at all. They don't know what they're doing. Whereas if we had seen an open discussion like this with the Cyberpunk team, and that we realized, oh, hey, they're being pushed to do it, I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that the Cyberpunk team was sitting there just cringing at the release. Like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so bad. Like, they knew it was going to be bad, but they had publishers and their audience, all the pre-orders, they had everybody wanting it right now. And they'd already delayed it. Was it once or twice? They had already delayed it. So they were like on a deadline, and they knew it wasn't ready, but yet they were forced to release it. So I think if more people knew the development side of it, and how difficult and a big pain in the butt it can be sometimes to get these games out and fix every single bug and make them as memorable and enjoyable as possible for the player. I think if people knew that, they'd be a little more. You wouldn't have seen people slamming them so hard. So yeah, definitely, I think transparency goes a long ways, and simple discussions like this, and like Jesse said, just ask. If anybody has any kind of questions at all about this game, or the process, or like what kind of work we're putting into it, myself and Jesse and Sky, like, we're always around. Especially me, I'm always on Twitter. People see me all the time, so I mean, just reach out and just ask. If there's something that you see, like, hey, this screenshot looked a little funky, or so, let us know, and we will try to address whatever issues are there. That's another beautiful thing about indies. It's like I said earlier, we love to appease the fans. It's just what we do.
And I think the transparency is good too, because there's always talk of cost, right? I mean, in the US, it's a little easier, right? $70 is $70, but Sky, where you are, that could be very significant after conversion and VAT and stuff. But
Right.
when the transparency of the discussion that we're having today clearly shows how much effort and time your team is putting in for very, very, there's going to be very little return for this team of 11 if we don't support this game and buy this game, is what I'm telling you. That's what I'm saying. So supporting indie teams by consuming their products and buying them is that's the only time you're going to hear me passionately tell people, open up your wallets, is because we need to support these indie teams.
Well, you actually touched on an interesting point, and it's something, what we haven't talked about is that we're actually all from all around the world. We're 11 people, but we're from, I think, 9 different countries. We've had roughly 23 people total on the team work on this project in total. There's just 11 of us currently. We've been around for the most part now. But we've been from literally, I think, 18 different countries. And so we've got to learn a lot about the communities and the different regions. And so we don't have everything set everywhere. And so what I'm going to say is not set in stone, but it is, one of our big areas of interest is in Brazil. Okay. And in Brazil, a $39 USD game is extremely expensive down there. So imagine the $60 ones. So in places like Brazil, who we have high interest in our game, we're going to be charging less. And so we're thinking in Brazil actually doing like $14 down there, because as opposed to $40 up here. Because I know I buy the hardware, and so I pay Brazil prices on hardware. And so, a $300 speaker up here, $300 audio monitor up here, cost me $1,000 in Brazil for the same equipment. So I'm like, that's massive, and that's just their upcharges on everything, and their taxes and fees, and the difference in the currency exchange rates. So we will be looking at the different areas, at least that we can control. We can't control everything. Some of it is controlled by Steam, but where we do get those controls, we do want to adjust appropriately for those environments so that everyone gets the chance to play, and they're not, behind US dollar paywalls.
That is like heartwarming, almost like verge of tears, because I know how inaccessible games are globally from a cost perspective. Right. This is so freaking huge what you guys are doing. And dude, indies, this is just, I'm almost speechless at this. So let's play just a fun little, I won't call it a game. Let's just have a little fun when we close. Sky, I'm going to start with you. What's the first indie game? I know David talked about it earlier, but we'll let him go again. What's the first indie game that you can remember? The very first indie experience that just changed your thought process on games, changed your thought process on indies?
See, that's a really difficult question for me, because you didn't used to get a lot of real indie RPGs. Not really. So that's a really tough one for me, because I don't think there necessarily has been like a game changer for me. That's not what opened me up, I think. It was early access games. So that's why we split sometimes in just like how we go about things, because I used to consistently only ever play early access games because I was trialing them out as that sort of thing. But I think what really opened my eyes to show the world that an indie can go further than a AAA probably would be Ninja Theory with the Hellblade series.
Oh, and man, that opened them up. That's really neat that you say that, though. I'm kind of glad it went in a direction I didn't think it would go, because it helps me understand the dynamic that you and Durinius have and why you're getting where you're getting, because you really have two sides of the spectrum that meet in the middle there. Yeah, Hellblade's a good one. Durinius, what about you? What's the indie game that just...
So I guess for me, and at the time I played it, in my head it wasn't indie, because I didn't know what indie was at that point in time. Would actually be, now looking back, would be Journey. And it was this first game that I ever played that was 8 hours long, and if you had the opportunity to meet someone else playing the game, you had no form of communication other than these little beeps and sonar pings, essentially. And I just remember going through it, and all you could hear was the sounds and the music, and there was no text to pay attention to, and there wasn't 100 different things taking your eyes away from what you're trying to focus on. And it was such an experience playing that game, and then coming across someone, and at first I'm like, oh, this is an NPC. And I'm like, wait, that's not an NPC. This person's like getting up on top of things. Like, the AI can't do that. And so I realized that this is a person. And then the button that had pinged before, like, I didn't know what that was for. And then I used it, and then they pinged back. And then we had to use this form of ping communication on, come over here and let's do this and make our way through. And I just remember that being such an awesome experience for me. So I guess that's probably the first indie that I had played, but not knowing it, and something that changed my opinion on how current indies are and how successful you can be. And I don't mean to steal David's thunder here, because he wasn't aware of this. But Verinius is part of that indie community that I was a moderator for, and so I got to know them there, and I remember messaging them and saying, hey, I'd really love to try your game. And so Vernius sent me the itch.io link, and I downloaded it, and then I played through it. I thought it was awesome, and so I messaged them back. I said, hey, just so you know, I want you to understand that this game made me remember Lunar and Lunar 2. And those are some of my absolute most favorite games ever of all time. And they are pixel games much like that. And he goes, what's Lunar 2? And what's Lunar? I'm like, no, go look them up. I'm like, they're massive, like, JRPG games. They were huge. It was a Sega title. And so he looks up, he goes, wow, I didn't realize it'd ever be compared to something of that caliber. And I'm like, no, I mean, I've played some pixel games. Yours is the first that made me feel that way. And so that's probably the first one in the indie scene that kind of made me realize that there's a lot you can do with very little and make it work incredible, and it's awesome. And you can build this whole community around it.
One dude. That's insane that one guy, a lawyer, a really busy lawyer, is making it. David, did you want to talk a little bit more about that like feeling when you played Law Mange and how it...
Yeah, I mean, I felt kind of the same way. I mean, when I played it, I was just like, wow, this game's really cool. It took me back to Chrono Trigger. That's really the last pixel art RPG that I really enjoyed, was back on the SNES, Chrono Trigger. I played it for hours and hours and hours. I mean, I just loved that game. And I'd actually played through it on an emulator, just several years back. But yeah, when I played Law Mage Academy, I really felt into the game as much as I did with Chrono Trigger. I mean, like, just so many different features, like, you could, decisions you made affected how the other characters in the game reacted to you. It could affect prices. It affected their opinion of you, whether or not they wanted to join your party, based on decisions you had made previously that you might not have even thought about. So for me, just that full scale immersion into the game I was like, holy cow! That's the point when I was like, okay, I want to play more indies, and the rest is history. Man, I just try to, just like Twilight Star here. Like, I really, if I didn't believe in it and I didn't believe in what they were doing and everything, I wouldn't have joined up with them. I'm like the most recent member. Like, I just came on recently. But yeah, so like I was streaming one night. I don't even remember what game I was streaming, but Jesse Dorinius came on and was like, talking in the chat to the sound, Fabry Sounds. He's the sound guy for the team, and they were mentioning about community manager and all this stuff. And I was like, hey, that'd be kind of cool. I'm not qualified at all. But then, like, hey, we can do this. So we started talking. I reached out to him, and just like Jesse said earlier, just ask. So like I started asking questions, and here we are. And this is one way that I feel that I can help out the indie community is get behind a game like this and really show people how powerful and amazing the indie game can be. And I really believe in this game.
That's awesome. I love the way you talk about it. The first indie, for me, it goes all the way back to PS2. I don't even know if any of you are going to know this game. A little unknown writer named David Cage made this unique game called Indigo Prophecies. It may have been called Fahrenheit, where you are, Sky. And it was this complete brand new game in a genre that nobody had ever heard of. It was only decision making and quick time events, QTEs. Like that's literally everybody's like, no, I don't know. I don't got nothing.
Pen and paper. I'm old school.
Okay.
What was the name of that again?
It's called Indigo Prophecies. It was called outside. I want to say that was only in the U.S. I think like in Canada and
it was
Europe.
Fahrenheit everywhere else.
It was Fahrenheit. Yeah. Okay. David K. Later, it became Beyond Two Souls, Heavy Rain, and then Detroit Become Human. So this little indie spawned an entire generation of like game. And so that's cool. For me back in that time, that really made me, because I love narrative journeys anyway. But I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I hope this catches on. So that's awesome. What I want to do is make sure we'll have everyone share their handle. Make sure we share any information, just so everybody knows. If you don't already know, David is also very famously known as Hour a Day Gamer, and that is your source of go-to information if you just want to learn everything there is to know about indies. He plays all the indies. He knows the developers. He shares it. That's your go-to guy to get all things indie. Sky, I'll start back with you. Where can folks find you on Twitter in order to give you a follow?
That will be at Keep It Nightly, all one word, but the night is in Knight in Armor and not the night is in the sky.
So like Keira Knightley, right?
Yeah, if we want to go down that kind of brooding awakening, yeah.
Dorinius, where can folks find you on Twitter?
So I am at Dorinius417, and yeah, I just post all of our game dev stuff, and I post some of the more development-y things. So if you want to see some of the behind the scenes, what we do that we don't post on Twilight Star, that's where you can see some of that stuff.
And Twilight Star is wait, don't tell me, TWS _ Heart of Air, EIR.
Yep.
Ah, yes. And then David, where can folks find you, Hour a Day Gamer? Hour a Day Gamer. If it's Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Discord, whatever, if it's out there and I'm actually on it, it's Hour a Day Gamer. I keep it the same across the board.
I think Google just needs to come up with like a Google card for you. Just like when you search that, it's the whole Google card.
Probably,
there you go.
I think.
And it's Dragon
Not that famous.
Is it DragonClawStudios.com? Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I will post, if you're watching this on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment below, and everybody's Twitter handle will be there. I'll put the Discord link. It's a really fun Discord community. It's a great place for you to go, and you can ask questions and interact with these individuals and several more. There's other people from the team and fans who are waiting to play the game like me that are in there. So everything will be in the pinned post.
So if you do want to support us in any way, that can be done through the website. Our Kickstarter is over, but you can still back us at any of those Kickstarter tiers through the website, and you just let us know. You fill out all that form stuff, and then we will put you in the logs for those same rewards for a Kickstarter tier.
Very cool. I'm not even sure what a Kickstarter is, so I don't know what that means. But some people might know what that means. I don't know what that means. So thank you so much again to the folks joining us from Dragon Claw Studios. This was a fantastic episode. Thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we will see you guys next week. Bye everybody.